Have you ever been in a situation where you were hot lapping as fast as you could, but had no idea how to improve? Or have you ever joined an online lobby and wondered how everyone was so much faster than you? Or maybe sometimes you're wondering how to even keep your car on the track. Well, if any of these situations sound familiar to you, you've come to the right place. Hi, my name is Scott and welcome to a new video. I've been sim racing for about 8 years now, and something that I've always dreamt about is a full guide that can be enjoyed by any sim racer out there. That's why over the past couple of weeks I've worked very hard on a complete series that will hopefully teach even a small thing to any sim racer looking to improve himself. Each episode gets deeper into one subject to keep it short and easy to understand, and every episode is also segmented into different skill groups so you can easily go to the part that you think is going to be relevant for you, or you can watch the whole episode and get a refresher on the basics. In today's episode, everything you need to know about the racing line. Racing is all about finding the quickest way around the track. So in this first episode, we're going to go over how to find that path. But before we do that, we need to remind ourselves of the basics. Each corner is broken down into 3 phases: entry, middle, and exit. When you approach a corner and you start slowing down your car, you're going to start turning in the direction the track is going to. The point at which you start turning your wheel is called the entry point. And when you're finished going all around the corner and unwinding your wheel, that is called the exit point. In between the turn-in point and the exit point, you will find the apex. This is the point at which your car is positioned closest to the inside of the corner. Most of these terms are rather self-explanatory, but this way at least we are all on the same page. Like we said earlier, today we're here to find the quickest way around the track, and cars go quickest in a straight line. So we need to make the corners as straight as possible. The solution for this: start from the outside of the corner at corner entry, then go all the way to the inside of the corner at the apex, and then end your way at corner exit all the way on the outside of the track again. And make sure to use all of the available track that is there for you for maximum performance. As you can see, this path creates the largest radius possible through the corner, thus creating the straightest possible line. Easy enough, right? Well, let's look at an example. The corner we're taking as a reference is the famous Parabolica at Monza. It's a long sweeping right-hander, so we're going to place the car all the way to the left of the track, using the full width of the road. We'll break the car down in a straight line until we reach about 130 km an hour, which is around the grip limit for this car in that corner. Being able to stick to the racing line is highly dependent on the speed at which you approach it. So when you first practice your racing lines, try to gradually increase the speed at which you attack it. After breaking off some speed, we're going to turn into the corner. Here you're gonna physically look towards the apex. Looking at where you're going is greatly gonna improve your ability to reach that place. At mid-corner, we reach our apex, and at that point, we're gonna unwind the wheel and apply throttle again, letting the car gradually reach the outside of the track again. While you first try to learn the racing line to a new track, it's important to take it easy. Go at it at your own pace. You're never gonna be fast straight away on a new track anyway, so better take it corner by corner until you can put it all together for that one magic lap. It's also very important that you take reference points for when to brake, when to turn in, and when to apply the throttle. Try to keep this in mind while you're training and push your limit further and further to try and gain lap time. With all these tips in mind, you should get up to pace to our next level in no time. Now that you know how to tackle corners individually, it's time that we combine them all together when you have multiple corners in a sequence, and that we optimize your line a little. Most of the time when we go to the racetrack, corners don't come one after the other with nice straights in between them. Corners flow into each other, making it sometimes a little bit difficult to find the ideal racing line. As a general rule, you want to optimize for the very last corner of a sequence. as this will allow for a greater top speed on the straight. A great place to practice this are the S's at Suzuka that will force you to find the ideal racing line in a series of bends following one after the other, to then place your car in the perfect spot to attack the double left-hander. To make sure you hit the right racing line, it's important to focus on your turn-in point and your apexes. And to monitor these two metrics, you need to be aware of your line of sight. In racing, oftentimes where you're looking is also where you're going. So it's important to always look as far into the distance, just like they teach you in the regular driving school. As soon as you've hit your braking markers and you've identified where to brake, you want to look for that apex. That's where you're gonna look from the beginning of the corner until you reach it. And as soon as you've reached that apex, you can start and look for the exit point of the corner. That is where you're gonna look at. A great exercise to train this is to go for a slower lap and consciously think about where you're looking at on track. You hit the brakes, identify where you need to brake, and as soon as you start braking, you're gonna look for the apex. And as soon as you hit the apex, you need to look for the exit. And once you've hit the exit, you look into the distance and maybe once or twice into your mirror. It's not a static thing. You need to constantly scan and go from far into the distance to closer by, of course, when there are other cars on track. If you struggle with this, a good exercise that can help some people is to say out loud where you're looking at during that slower lap for training. Another thing that you want to keep in mind as you start picking up the pace is that you want to avoid any wheel spin or heavy steering corrections, as this will disrupt the car's balance, costing you a lot of lap time. It's important to always try to be as smooth as possible with your throttle and steering, as this is the quickest way around the track. No need to mash the throttle when you come out of the corners. You need to find the perfect point at which you can start applying the throttle and stick with that moment. As a general rule, when you start unwinding the wheel is the moment at which you want to start applying the throttle gradually. When you can optimize all of this, it's time to look at new techniques that can help you gain even more lap time over the course of a lap. Up until now, we've worked with the geometrical racing line. However, depending on the situation, this will not always be the best line to take. The geometrical line is mathematically the fastest way to approach any corner, but since we don't live in a two-dimensional world, loads of elements can make you shift your line in one way or another. Let's look at an example. Tossa is a hairpin at the Imola circuit, followed by a sizable straight. If you want to maximize your top speed on the straight, you want to be on throttle as fast as you can. So instead of using the geometrical line hitting the apex smack in the middle of the corner, you can potentially use a later apex, widening your entry to then exit the corner in a straighter line, allowing an earlier full throttle application. Now this technique works very well when it comes to getting a good exit before a long straight, but it's not the fastest way in the corner. The traditional line is still the fastest if cornering speed is what you're looking for. So while it's a nice thing to have in your toolbox, don't overuse the late apex. I know it's tempting, certainly if you're learning a new track, because late apexes allow for more mistakes, while the geometrical line asks you to be precise and use the exact right speed. What I'm trying to say is use it thoughtfully. Be aware of your surroundings and adapt to the track accordingly. Now, apart from the track layout itself, sometimes you will need to adapt to the track surface. And two examples come into mind. The straight right after the Monaco Square in, well, Monaco. Now, this infamous straight has a huge bump, which makes it easier, faster and safer for drivers to run around it rather than to jump over it. And then the other one is just the whole Sebring track, which is surrounded by a lot of bumps that drivers need to be aware of. And one of the biggest ones is, I think, the one in the last hairpin that you need to go all around of and take a very, very late apex to avoid. Now, if you've been sim racing for quite a while, there's one last technique that you can add to your sim racing toolbox, and that is to make the use of a square racing line. Now don't get me wrong, this technique or tool to your toolbox is not required to be part of the very best sim racers out there, and it's in fact much more dependent on your own driving style than on anything else, but it still brings some positives. First off, what do I mean by a square racing line? Well, instead of trying to go for a perfectly geometrical line, drivers that make use of a square racing line will make use of the mid-corner to create a shallower line, applying a lot of turning in a shorter time. This allows for a very fast entry and exit to the corner, but require an even slower apex speed. It is most useful to cars with loads of power and grip like Formula 1 cars and GT3s for example, but I thought I'd still mention it, as it can also be used in wet weather conditions as part of your wet line to be able to control the car better on throttle. Think about this. If you spend more time turning, you have more potential to send the car skidding, while if you turn very quickly, you can focus more on the throttle without having to worry about the steering messing up your balance. Now, when people talk about the wet line, they mean this different racing line that racing drivers take when the track gets wet. I was gonna treat wet weather racing in a different episode, but I already wanted to mention that depending on the conditions, whether the track is hot or cold, wet or dry, or a multitude of other factors, you will need to adapt your racing line accordingly. When the track gets less grippy, you might need to take a wider line, and when you have more grip, you might be able to go for a shallower one. So just keep that in mind when you hit the track. That's all for today's lesson, guys. I hope you learned something today. Make sure to get in loads of practice in before next Tuesday, as we're going to be handling the ideal way to brake before a corner. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, as we release one episode of the Sim Racing Guide every Tuesday of the week. And in the description below, I've added all of the sources to this video, as well as some additional information so you guys can get even more technical if you need to. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you space racers in the next one. Goodbye.